welcome to the Nursing and Midwifery Sustainability Network. My name is Angela Hayes. I'm the Nurse Fellow and Project Lead at the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare. We meet monthly and it's the last Thursday of the month at 12:30, and everyone is welcome to this free meeting where we have very, very interesting speakers and discussions. The sessions are recorded and available to view on YouTube. Do use the chat facility for comments or questions, which we'll pick up at the latter half of the meeting. So I'd like to introduce this month's speaker, who is Dr. Duika Burges Watson. Is that right? I've pronounced that right, Duika? Yes. Who is a nature recovery ranger at Newcastle upon Tyne Hospitals. Duika is a researcher who is widely published on the subject of eating and sensory issues and has collaborated with leading UK charities on smell training. Her most recent book explores how sensory rewilding can transform our relationship with food, health and nature. Really, really looking forward to this month's session. So I'll hand over to you straight away, Duika.
Okie doke, and I'll just share my screen. Is that working? Can you see that, Angela?
It is perfect, yes.
Great. Okay, then I shall just about begin, except for some reason. Just hang on 1 second as I just organise myself. Hello, everybody. I am Duika Burges Watson, and I'm based in Newcastle, and I'm sitting on a small computer, so just struggling a little bit with the setup here. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is a little intervention that I've been piloting at Newcastle upon Tyne Hospitals Trust to look at using aroma as a pathway to nature connection and well-being. Basically asking the question of what happens when I bring a forest scent onto a ward. So this is early stages, so I hope that you will stay with me as I bring you on a developing journey rather than one that is fully organised at this point. I'm just trying to find where I change my screen. Okay, so the 4 scents that I have developed with a professional perfumer, a classically trained perfumer who is now also a clinical psychologist and a biochemist, are scents that are designed to evoke the outdoors that we can bring indoors, or at least that was the idea that we had in the first iteration. So the 4 scents that we started with were feast, because we did this just before Christmas, moss and soil, a forest scent, and snow scent. Now these are quite complex formulations. They're not simply getting one extract from one tree, but they're quite complex extracts, and I will talk a little bit about why we've done it that way presently. But first of all, before I do, I just wanted to say a little bit about myself and why me to do this. So first of all, before I was a nature recovery ranger, I spent nearly 2 decades better understanding why the loss of scent enjoyment, or the loss of ability to enjoy scent, was so devastating for people. So I worked initially with an NIHR project with head and neck cancer survivors, looking at altered taste and smell in cancer survivorship. This is 6 months post-treatment when they're supposedly cured, and yet lots of people in that situation were really struggling to eat well. So I did about 10 years of research around head and neck cancer and led a research group with a clinical psychologist looking at a whole range of different areas where people had altered relationships with food. And smell comes out as a particularly important component, which I will talk to you about as I go along. You'll see here some pictures of me outdoors with some nurses, but there's also on the right-hand side a little smell and taste box that we developed with the Institut Paul Bocuse in Lyon. This is a very interesting centre where they work on food with clinicians to figure out how to make food more enjoyable for people in situations where it has become not so enjoyable in medical settings. So we started a conference the Altered Taste Conference, it was called, during COVID, actually. And that is still running every year to think about food and altered eating. I subsequently also, because of this expertise, I also ended up working with a charity called Absent, which is for people with smell loss or smell changes in the experience of smell. That's a UK charity who really took off during COVID. They started with about, I think, Chrissy Kelly, who runs it, she had about 5,000 members when she first started this organisation, and hundreds of thousands during COVID. So COVID was a big shift in global understanding of smell and olfaction and why it matters. So before I start, what I really want to do is express my strongest feeling that nobody can understand this field unless they experience it first. So if you were to have a piece of fruit with you, anything that you were about to eat, what I would really like to do is a little experiment. And for anybody who watches this at home later, I would encourage you to find something that you can chew on so that you can really experience what I'm talking about, because I have found through the years that people don't get it unless you do it. So you can see the picture here in the background is of some ICU nurses discovering the taste of dried mango with a nose clip on. So we're going to do a similar kind of experiment. We're going to hold the nose, grab something to eat, chew it for a while, and think very closely about what it is that you're tasting when you're chewing whatever it is that you're chewing. So you chew, chew, chew a few times, and then you release your nose and breathe in and out very slowly. And what you will find, I can see a few nodding heads, you get it. So without your sense of smell, food becomes very bland and uninteresting. All you get is the sweet, the sour, bitter, salty, and perhaps some umami flavors. But the actual flavor, the big bursting flavors of food, whether it was mango or lemon or jelly beans is the classic test that is used in most settings. You miss so much about the flavor of food when you take out your sense of smell. So that's the first kind of lesson to bring in here, that we misunderstand the importance of smell and its importance in our lives. Now, during COVID, we learnt that on a grand scale with a lot of people. There was something like 12% of people with the first variant ended up experiencing quite profound alterations in their experience of smell. And it was because of the way that it happened. It was so dramatic that people really noticed. So suddenly overnight, one day you're eating perfectly well, and then you wake up the next morning and you can't smell your coffee, you can't smell your loved one, you can't smell the dog, you can't pick up your baby and smell the baby, you can't tell what's going on outside. You need somebody to support you, because if there was a gas leak, you wouldn't know. That condition is called anosmia. There was another profoundly altered experience that many people had with COVID called parosmia, and many people are still suffering from this, which is basically a distorted sense of smell, when basically people would describe the world smelling like death or rancid. It was actually triggered by real things in the environment. And during COVID, myself and Chris Kelly from Absent, the charity that I spoke about, put together a lot of resources for people living with altered smell with COVID-19. But the thing that I wanted to say about this is that it's more than about losing your appetite for food. When you have profoundly altered smell and taste, your whole experience of the world changes. And we were finding some people were feeling a sense of existential distress about their place in the world. Suddenly nothing made sense to them anymore. So there was a huge psychological burden for losing your sense of smell. So I'm saying all this because the opposite is also true, I think, that we don't appreciate our sense of smell until we lose it or until it changes. And how much of the world we experience through smell is often not that obvious to us. We take it for granted. So we used to think that humans could smell maybe 10,000 different compounds in the environment. But we now think that it's a much, much more impressive figure. The human olfactory system, with hundreds of different olfactory receptors, far outperforms the other senses in the number of physically different stimuli we can discriminate. They are now saying more than 1 trillion potential things that we can smell in the environment. So if you've ever met a sommelier or someone like me who's a honey sommelier, so I enjoy tasting and smelling different honeys, you will discover that they will say to you there's nothing special about them. They've just worked really hard to develop their capacity to identify different scents and name them. And you may have had this experience where you smell something, you know what it is, but you just can't put a name to it. It's really common experience. So what sommelier training and all these other trainings do is help you to bridge the gap between that recognition and the cognitive understanding of what it is that you're actually appreciating. And we all have the capacity to do that. So there's an enormous amount of diversity within smells. So if we take, for example, a very simple example, a strawberry, there are, you thought a strawberry was just one smell? No, there are 81 plus volatile compounds in a strawberry. And you will find when you work with somebody, a perfumer like somebody like Michelle, who also is a biochemist, she can actually pick out some of the different chemical notes within a single aroma. So our capacity with smell is incredible. Nature is full of incredibly complex smells. And one of the things about this work is that our sense of smell is, if you like, our first line of connection with the outdoor environment. The little yellow olfactory nerves that you see hanging down there, that's the only part of our brain system that actually hangs out in the environment. The cranial nerve is directly exposed to the environment in our nasal passages. So if you think about that as a defense mechanism, what that means is our sense of smell is designed to be our first line of defense. So if there's a smell of fire, we'll smell fire before we even see it, before sometimes we hear it. It's a very important defense mechanism. It's also a way that many chemicals actually, if you like, enter into our bodies and into our brains. So what these trillions of different chemicals are doing to us is still very much a developing science, but we do know some things. We know that smell matters a lot in healthcare. So this image is from Chrissy Kelly's work, but she has picked a lot of this up from having worked with ENT surgeons, neuroscientists and others to understand that we process smells through various different parts of our brain, and it's kind of like a cascade of different sensory processing. And unlike other sensory inputs, smells go straight to the emotional part of the brain. So again, I'm sure many of you will have had that experience of smelling something and it taking you back in time to another period, often a happy childhood experience. And we know that smells particularly can often trigger happy childhood memories in ways that other senses do not. So it's quite an interesting sense in that respect. We also know from research that hospitals tend to be sensorially deprived. We have a very limited range of particular types of smells in hospitals. And there is evidence to suggest that people who are exposed to hospital environments, this is in this Nature and Health and Wellbeing paper, nurses and others, for example, actually lose their capacity to discriminate between the vast world of smells outside the hospital door by being in that limited sensory environment. So that goes too for patients as well. So there's a direct impact of not being exposed to nature smells, and it's something I'm particularly aware of for patients who are long stay patients within a hospital. the other angle of the nature and human well-being is that they have very strong evidence of a link between sensory decline or smell loss or smell disturbance and a range of neurological problems. So often smell loss is associated with, for example, Parkinson's, dementia, anything where the brain is affected, you tend to also have smell loss. So the good side of the story is that in a lot of these conditions, regular exposure to smells and what some people call smell training can improve your ability to differentiate between different smells, which is fabulous news. So during COVID, Chrissy Kelly and colleagues were all developing smell training protocols. She's since, interestingly, suggested that she'd rather think of it as smell awareness, and I'll come to that in a second. Come on, slide, move on. Why won't it move on? Oh, I seem to be stuck. Next. Okay, so one of the things that we tend never to be taught is how to smell things. So I wanted to give you a little guide that you could introduce in a ward or anywhere to think about how you actually pick up scent. So this is a metaphor that was developed by my friend Chrissy Kelly to describe this process. And I want you to think of a 5-story building, and the door is open on the ground floor, and there is a window open on the 4th floor of the building. So we have a door open on the ground floor, a window open on the 4th floor. Let's imagine the smell of lavender wafting from the outside into this building. Now you are the building, this is your brain. When you take a big breath in, the aromas of that lavender will travel up the staircase and they will go straight out the 4th floor window. That's the nature of how smell works. Your olfactory bulb is sitting on the 5th floor. How do you get the smell to the 5th floor? And the analogy is this. In order to make your sense of smell work better, you need to have tiny little sifts. It's like the smell needs to waft to the 5th floor. You can't suck it into the 5th floor. So if you imagine taking tiny weeny little bunny sniffs, like tiniest bits of air that you can possibly imagine when you're doing a smell exercise. So I'm grabbing anything random off my desk here just to demonstrate. I don't know if you can see me, but tiny little sips of air almost. You will find that it is a very different experience than taking in a great big deep breath. So the other thing that does is focus attention in a very different way. So you become very much more absorbed in the task when you're taking these very tiny sniffs and trying to cognitively capture what is going on with that smell. So it's a brain exercise as well. I wanted to introduce you to the intervention that we've been doing. I showed you the jars at the beginning, and on the hospital wards, we've kind of discovered that it's actually easier to use perfumer strips. So this is actually Michelle in the background, and you can see she's got all her little scent bottles there on the table. And we were playing with this to see how it would work. So the ingredients of one of the scents that we've called Forest, it actually is made up of 4 different extracts from different trees. So it's got some fir balsam, some Siberian fir, a white cypress leaf extract, and some ravensara, which is a tree from Madagascar and has known properties that many people recognise as good for cardiovascular health and various other things. All of the different substances that we put into our scents actually have some pharmacological benefit, but that's not why we were doing it. It was more to evoke the feeling of forest, of being outdoors. And so what we do with these scents is we will have the forest scent, which is a very complex scent, and just give it to people and let them sit with it and smell it and ask them if it reminds them of anything. How do they feel? Where does it take them? And then if we want to extend that and make it more complex, we can introduce some of the other components and say, well, this is actually a complex scent. It's an accord, as they would call it in perfumery, with lots of different components that we've added together to create this experience of what it's like to be in a forest. So because Michelle is a natural perfumer, she's very good at combining these scents to give you that kind of experience. So that's what we did. Now, I worked with the ENT surgeon to think about how we would deliver this in ward settings, and I came up with 2 postcards. The first postcard is a map of the hospital, and I've identified, I'm actually going to change the images on this. This is not the final version. I've started to identify trees that exist on our hospital grounds that have interesting scents. And so I will put the names of the trees on the map. And the idea will be that once you've discovered the scents in the hospital, just by smelling them on a perfumer stick, you can go for a walk around the hospital grounds and find some of the trees from which those scents are derived. So it encourages people outdoors to have a different kind of relationship with nature. So again, teaching them the simple bunny sniff technique, perhaps going for a walk with them, I think will make for a really interesting and engaging activity for people. The other postcard, because I'm very aware from having worked during COVID that people can lose their sense of smell. And we may discover many people who are actually experiencing anosmia on wards. So, for example, we're working with the renal ward at the moment, and loss of sense of smell is a common side effect of dialysis. So I have to be very careful not to assume that people have a sense of smell. So the second postcard is support and resources for what to do if your sense of smell has changed. So this points you to both what olfactory dysfunction is and what you can do if you discover that, or if you're worried about your sense of smell, who to go and see, and what the sort of support organisations are. So pointing people to Absent, I spoke about before, but also Smell Taste, which is a large charity working with people with smell and taste disorders. So I guess how I'm doing this at the moment is I've introduced it to wherever wants it. And what I've been discovering is that staff want it as much as patients want it, because staff are often stuck in these indoor spaces for a long time as well. And there's an enormous amount of enjoyment in taking just a few minutes out to smell some of these interesting scents. So I've been working with the kidney ward. I'm working now with outpatients, and I've taken it around with occupational therapists who are very open to this kind of work. I've had some interest from Midwifery, actually, although they want me to see if I can get our perfumer to develop a fresh baby scent, which they think would go very well. So I have to talk to her about that. So this is where I'm at with this smell intervention at the moment. How's it gone down? Really interesting. So I've taken it onto some older people with older people's wards, and the staff and the patients seem to engage in the same kinds of ways. So I kind of feel like it's an intervention that brings people together as well in a really nice way. And often you will get, people will immediately be transported somewhere in their heads to somewhere else. So it's, gosh, that smells like what my mum's house smelled like at Christmas, or it reminds me of events that I had with family members, or that it's completely distracting away from what else is going on in the hospital. So it is a really interesting intervention in terms of a fast way of taking people out of the illness narratives that they're caught in and into a more experiential and often positively emotional space. So one of the reasons why I'm very interested in it. So this is where I'm at, and this is as far as I've got, and I'm very willing to take questions or talk more about this work. I advertised it with the picture on the left, bringing nature indoors with the Nature Recovery Ranger, and basically I've had lots of people asking for me to come and deliver the intervention in different wards around the hospital. But equally, I'm also now working with Michelle to develop some forest walks, so that we can actually do some walks, more adventurous walks outside. So we've done a fantastic event recently with the National Trust at Wellington, and we did a nature walk where we were smelling the extracts of the trees that we were encountering along that walk. So Michelle had designed again another range of really interesting outdoor scents. And one of the things that interests me about this in particular is in psychology they talk about flow state, this kind of interesting moment that you go into when your brain switches off. It's a task at hand, but your brain switches off from ruminating on other thoughts and just becomes totally involved in the activity that you're doing at the time. So I found it myself when we first did a forest scent walk. I'd planned all these things that I was going to do and say and tell people about, and people just went off into their own little worlds, and it was incredibly relaxing. It sent shivers down my spine doing this work. So I'm very excited about where I will take it next. So I leave you here with a woolly tea tree from Tasmania as one of my favourite smells in one of the local forests. So that is as far as I've got at this point, but I'd be very happy to talk more about scent and get your ideas about how I might do this more effectively, or in different wards, or any ideas you have.
Thank you so much, Duika. That's really, really fascinating stuff. I can see Amanda already is hot.
I am. It's the midwifery thing that threw me, because when I was pregnant, my sense of smell was so hyper. If you came into me on a ward, a maternity ward with another smell, I'd probably throw it at you, because I think it was like, it was super, super, super sensitive. I can't explain it. It was awful. Absolute everything. I couldn't bear the smell of anything at all.
Yeah, and that hyperosmia, as it's called, is really common in pregnancy. And I mean, I haven't read much of the literature around that and why it happens. But you know, I mean, in pregnancy, people will suddenly want to eat certain foods and not others, or have really sensitivities. So something happens to the olfactory system that I'm not fully understanding at this point. But yes, I get this is the other thing about smell, and is that having hypersensitivity to smells can be really challenging. So during COVID, one of the experiences lots of people had was a condition called parosmia, which is this distorted sense of smell when exposure to certain chemicals in the environment would trigger this reaction, which was like the smell of death. And so people would we discovered that one of the simplest ways to deal with it was to wear a nose clip when you were trying to eat something, because then you wouldn't actually get the aromas causing that trigger. So it may be that in certain circumstances you have to be very attentive to what people's experience of smell is. And it's very preference based as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Duika?
Can I ask, it's kind of or just a technique question, when you were talking about your bunny sniffs.
Yeah.
When you're encouraging those little sniffs, is it a very quick in and out, or is it kind of multiple ins? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. That's a very good question. I'm just going to have a go, actually, because I think it might be little sniffs in. The reason why we do it is there is this, because smell is our first line of defense, there is a process that happens called habituation, which is your body is preparing you for danger, is wanting to check that nothing's dangerous. So if it smells something that is okay and safe, it will kind of switch off its recognition of that smell, ready for the next dangerous thing that might come along. So the bunny sniff technique is generally to just give little pauses between the brain's experience of that smell aroma, and it seems to heighten you can kind of, if you like, it's a first experience, it's a first experience, it's a first experience, so that you get a much stronger experience of the aroma by doing the little bunny sniffs. But interestingly, I mean, I've asked this of various people over time, because Chrissy and I kind of developed this a long time ago, and she said that she was never taught to smell. No sommeliers that I've ever met have given me a technique for smelling. So we've kind of discovered this through our own work, that this works best. And particularly when people have got a reduced sense of smell, the little bunny sniffs can really help, because if you just take one gulp and don't get it, then you feel disappointed. So the little sniffs kind of helps people who may have a slightly lessened ability to smell. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Stephanie.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Stephanie from Germany. I joined this session for the first time, so thank you very, very much for this interesting session and this really interesting talk. I'm working in the field of actually called healing forests. So we create forests where we go out with patients to do therapy and interventions. And one big point is smelling the environment, being aware of your senses. So I have so many questions and so many ideas. So I just would like to ask, I have your email address, if it's possible to get in contact with you, because I think it's very important to get to learn more about the background of the sensory way, how we smell.
Yes.
And to get an idea, maybe we can bring the forest to the patient and we bring the patient to the forest. So I got really some ideas how to implement some interventions or something. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead, email. Yeah.
And Stephanie, please feel free to join us at these monthly events. There might be other things that you're interested in. You're very welcome to keep joining us. So Duika, there's a couple of comments in the chat. First one from Amanda: we advise putting clothing into memory boxes for terminally ill patients.
Yeah, all the time.
Putting
we use it all the time.
clothing.
Like mums and dads spray perfume on an item, like a scarf or socks or whatever, and just put it within the other stuff that goes in the memory box. People get, and especially children, get a lot of comfort from that. So
Yeah,
it's very common. It's been going on for years. It's not a
Yep.
new thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a definite emotional connection there, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Tony has thanked you for your session, but has had to leave early. And then Hannah, so she's having a lot of background noise where she's working, so has put her question in the chat. She works in OT neuro rehab. Really interested to incorporate some of these suggestions into their service. Are there any considerations for this client group in neuro rehab?
Yes, lots. Several things to say about that, and I'm not an expert. I'm not doing this as a clinical intervention. I'm doing it as a nature engagement intervention, in part because I don't have expertise in things like neuro rehabilitation. But obviously, the sense of smell is affected differently with different neurological conditions. So in the case, for example, of road traffic accidents, you can have a complete loss of smell that cannot come back, whereas in some neurological damage, you can retrain your sense of smell and get and do some interesting work with that. So that's a bit beyond my level of knowledge and expertise. I know there's a lot of research that's been done. Well, let me just give you two other bits of research that are quite interesting. One is about the mental health benefits of using smell. There are actually some volatile compounds within tree smells, for example, like terpenes and things like that can have short-term impacts on mood, on stress and anxiety, also on inflammation. So there is some research around using particular types of scents for their pharmacological benefit, but it's not known really whether it's the conscious appreciation of the smell that's doing the work, or if it's actually there is the neuroimmunological work that's doing the work. So we don't really know exactly what's happening in that area. At least that's my understanding. So something is happening, and it normally tends to be good. So I can't see particular reasons that you'd need to be cautious about it. But there may be more research to look up on that for particular conditions. The other thing that I would say, actually, just Stephanie, coming back to your forest bathing and those sorts of things. One of the other things that I neglected to mention is that if you think about urban environments, they're making constant demands on our direct attention. So there's lots of things changing all the time. There's an exhaust from a car. There's a cigarette smoke there. There's lots of different things happening around us, whereas natural smellscapes tend to be more constant, and you only notice really sharp changes. So they're less cognitively demanding to be in those sorts of environments. So this kind of connects to this idea of attention restoration theory. I don't know if you know about this. Smelling a forest does something that can be measured for somebody who is stressed or an anxious patient, because it's reducing the cognitive loads. So that's something else to think about. I'm not sure that that's very helpful in terms of on neurorehabilitation, but you know, I would love to work in neurorehabilitation and see what we could do with OTs in that area. I think it would be very interesting.
There you go. I've got a few questions scribbled down, but Amanda, you go next. I'll kind of.
Well, no, you go first. You go first.
Okay, so what we I'm talking years ago now, when I worked in critical care, and we used to use aroma sticks for patients, and the idea was that they kind of chose certain smells that would help with whatever conditions patients were facing. So if they were very anxious, say, we ended up using these aroma sticks to try and kind of reduce the amount of sedation that we were giving patients for anxiety, or or medication to kind of calm them. So that was something we did a little while ago. Not having so it's really interesting that to kind of see this so many years later, that there's clearly a load of work going on in that area, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID really made people a lot more aware of this, because so many people were impacted, or their sense of smell was impacted, that it generated a huge kind of revival of interest in smell. So there's lots of books coming out about it now. And lots more research going on.
The other thing I wanted to say was the thing about the walks that you're doing, that if people are going around looking for certain scents, what they're also doing, you're encouraging that mobility in patients as well, and which is a lovely little co-benefit, isn't it? And without realizing it, you're actually getting patients a bit more mobile.
You're right. And part of the reason I was thinking about it was because we've got very limited green space where we are at this hospital site, and it's hard to think about where you can, like, you can't develop a great big new beautiful sensory garden anywhere, but you can create what I'm calling sensory gradient planting. So I'm planting one area that's got, particular scents, and another area that's very limited in scent, to reduce the sort of sensory overload. So thinking about the sort of sensory landscapes within a site, you can do very small interventions, but as a nature trail, they can combine to become quite a large one. Yeah. So addressing things like mobility through that is also another way. Yeah. And luckily on our site, we've got lots of things that already smell, so I don't have to do. So I'm already benefiting from what's here. So it's just using the site differently.
Okay, I've got two more, and then Amanda, it's over to you. Have you got time to stay, Amanda? Yeah. My first was a question, I don't really know the answer to this, but my understanding is, and I'm a sucker for them, are the scented candles. But they're supposed to be bad for you, aren't they? Is that right? From a respiratory point of view?
Are they? I have no idea.
No, right, okay.
I have no idea. Sorry, can't answer that.
Right, okay, right.
I will. Yeah.
And then finally, it was just whether or not, Duika, you were able to share So the first time we met in person was at our office day, and we had a chat in the pub, and you were telling me about all the work that you were doing and the book that you'd written and that. And I was really, really fascinated. But it was about some of the work that you were doing about helping patients with dementia and their altered taste. And I wondered if you'd be able to just kind of talk for a few minutes on that, because I just thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, actually, this is not work that I did, but work done by some of my colleagues, where they developed a scent device that released scents into a room before meal times to encourage dementia patients to want to eat again. So they used familiar scents that the dementia patients would recognise as emotionally beneficial. So, for example, they would have, I don't know, sort of cinnamony, clovey scents before breakfast. So they would release the scents into the room before breakfast, and that would increase the appetite by something like 50% for dementia patients. So there was there was a couple of studies I saw where they tried to do that. They tried to do that in a sort of clinical setting, and I think they completely missed the point, which was they started releasing the smells of the food into the environment before the meal times. But the point about releasing the scents was releasing emotionally positive scent, not about releasing food scent. So they didn't have such success. So I felt it was a bit of a shame that the researchers hadn't quite understood the reasons for releasing those scents. But the ode machine was developed by a perfumer, and she went on to other things, and for whatever reason she couldn't make that a business case to do that. But I think the idea behind it doesn't need a machine, I mean, that's quite simple. So yeah, I still think that there's a lot of scope for using scent within dementia care in particular. And use it, but then you would have to have conversations with the patients or the patient's family to know what the scents were that might be most valuable in that situation. So that's what I would say about that, because it is about emotional connection far more than it is about particular food scents, although some food scents might be emotional as well. So I know for me, if you put Earl Grey tea in a room, I'm there.
I'm out.
Yeah, I don't
Other
like
people
that.
are out, but
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
yeah, mine reminds me of my granny. So but it's not the same for everybody, which is again an example of why you have to be really careful. You can't just do this is a blanket scent that everybody's going to love. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
The
the
other thing that you
soap
said,
that used to have a really strong smell? There's a soap, isn't there? Is it coal tar?
Coal
Is that
tar
the
soap.
Yeah.
orange coal tar soap? That reminds me of my grandma.
right?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
classic
Yeah.
scent. Yeah.
But the other thing that you were saying in that discussion that we had, a couple of months ago, was that the thing with the altered taste sensations for people with dementia, and I think you described a lemon, that patients suffering with dementia may only get the bitterness of a lemon rather than the lemony taste and things. So anything
So
that we can
again,
do to help.
so like the experience, I mean, I haven't got the slide up with me, but one of the things that we did with the altered eating research was to think about what sensory capacities people still had available to them and to compensate for losses in other areas. So if you have lost your sense of smell, you still have taste, sweet, sour, bitter, salty, umami. You still have trigeminal sensations, so spiciness. So if you big up some of those other areas, colour, texture, you can sort of create something that's still enjoyable. But unless you understand the importance of scent in our experience of food, that would make no sense. So if you give somebody a lemon, as a good example, or lemon juice, and they have no sense of smell, all they're going to get is sour. So it's not much fun when all you get is sour from a lemon. You want the lemony scent to create that interest. So understanding what somebody's sensory capacities are across all of, not just with smell, but also with, can they taste sweet, can they taste salt, can they taste bitter, Can they taste umami? In the cancer work, we ended up using lots of umami in food, boosting food with umami flavors, because that gave people a sense of the savouriness and enjoyment of food that way, when they couldn't perhaps taste something. So there are ways of compensating for losses in one sensory area by bigging up the sensory capacities in another.
Right. Really interesting. Okay, Amanda, fire off.
I think you've mentioned something about this. So we work with the National Garden Scheme to run projects at the Queen's Institute. So we've had quite a lot of projects that have developed sensory parts of gardens for all sorts of different populations. So people with learning disabilities, people PTSD, veterans. So they've actually organised those sorts of sensory areas, and it's made a massive difference to people's mood. And we were going to have a project, but unfortunately it's not going to run this year, for the de-escalation of children with ADHD in a garden. If you've got more sense in there, that can actually help de-escalation. So I mean, I don't want to hijack Angela's thing, but if you could have your email address, I'd be very interested if you come and speak to some our project leads about this subject, because I think it's just a really important thing. So, and I can't see if that's your email address because I can't read it.
Oh yeah, it's too small.
I'm behind you. It's too small. It's like not a chance. I can't.
That's really interesting, and I'm actually at the moment one of the areas that I'm really interested in is working with the cardiothoracic ward with children with sensory processing difficulties. We have a team here that's interested in sensory processing disorders. They're called the sensational team, mostly occupational therapists. But we haven't sort of mapped out yet, but we think we'd like to map out a sensory gradient for children with different sensory processing needs, because some of them need more input and some of them need less. So creating sort of different areas is what we're looking at the moment. So yes, I'd love to come and talk to some people who know gardens to be able to think how to do that better.
I say they know gardens, but they're all community nurses who are developing community gardens in different settings. We've got inclusion health this year, primary care, other settings that I can't remember off the top of my head. But we've had quite a lot of projects that have done this sort of thing, and I didn't know that somebody like you existed, because we've definitely had somebody come and speak to without hijacking you from Angela's sessions, obviously.
It's fine. Full network.
I think I can read that now.
Good.
That's slightly bigger, but thank you.
Fantastic. And then I think Liz, a couple have had to leave the session, but Liz, you've said here about your the overview about forest volatile organic compounds, and there's a link there to that.
Good. Yep.
Yeah, it's just because someone was mentioning about it, but it's got a really nice table in the middle that talks about, you started talking about the terpenes and those kinds of things. So it's sort of got a table of some of those, and then the trees that they tend to be associated with, and what effects research has shown that they're associated with.
Fabulous.
So it's just quite a nice, it's a meta-analysis, so it's quite a nice overview.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you, Liz. That's really helpful.
Brilliant. So what are you doing next was going to be my final question. Duika, what's the plan?
Yeah, well, do you know, I started off with these 4 scents. These are bespoke created scents to just work with those. And what I'm finding more and more interesting is breaking the scents down, because I think the big question that I have that I'm really excited about is, if you take the forest scent, for example, that's made of 4 different components. If you've ever done a perfuming course, you'll have your little sticks. I'd show you, but you have your little sticks, and to figure out the percentage of each smell that you want in a jar, you bring them further or closer away so that you can figure out, I want half the amount, or I want only a tiny bit, or I want lots, So you bring scents together using perfumer sticks to figure out what the balance between different elements are. And that's and what I've kind of realized from doing all that kind of work is there's a link here to biodiversity. There's a link here to understanding biodiversity through scent, and I'm really interested in people being able to pick out, like if you go to the supermarket and you buy a tomato, mostly they're wrapped in plastic. You never get to smell them. You certainly wouldn't be looking for particularly different scents within one tomato. You wouldn't be able to recognize that that tomato has a different range of scents in it from the other tomato. So I'm interested in how I can develop some of this to talk about the importance of biodiversity in nature, in food systems, in how we engage with the world. I guess that's kind of where I want to take it, but I don't know how to do it yet. It's just an idea.
Brilliant.